Let's just play a little jazz. Come on.
For me, the action isn't just
Morphine for mojitos. Morphine for mojitos. I just wanna talk to you was cool like that. I'm a cool guy.
Welcome back to Mann-Splaining. I'm John, one of the hosts of Framework, and with me, as always, is the other host of Framework, Al. How are you today, Al?
I am pretty good. We are into, doing our Michael Mann series today, and he is entering his groove, right? I mean, after the stutter step of The Keep, this is a full-blown Michael Mann movie we're talking about, right?
Yeah, this is about the most Michael Mann that it gets. Is that true? I don't know. It's pretty Michael Mann here.
Heat kind of defines everything forever with him, it seems.
Right.
It feels like. But if it's not Heat, it's Miami Vice defines him. And this has a lot of Miami Vice, like, color
Huge
palette.
Miami Vices.
At the least.
It's also Michael Mann's only foray into franchise filmmaking, as it were.
Yeah, this is the only time we're going to talk about Michael Mann doing, like, IP, you know?
Yeah. Of course, it wasn't IP, really, at the time. It was based on a novel. I think this movie actually predates the novel Silence of the Lambs, or I think they came out the same year. So basically, and yeah, of course, this is based on Red Dragon by Thomas Harris, the first in the Hannibal Lecter books. This is the first time it was adapted in any format. It has been adapted twice since then into the Brett Ratner film Red Dragon, of course, and the Hannibal television show.
But this is the first of the Hannibal Lecter books, but this is not, at this point, it's not a Hannibal Lecter book. And
No.
this is not a Hannibal Lecter movie, the way that Silence of the Lambs were. I mean, eventually Hannibal just becomes the title of the movie, or the prequel even, but in this case, how much is Hannibal Lecter on screen here?
15 minutes, maybe?
Not even, I don't think.
Oh, he's got 2 or 3 scenes. I think he's got 3 scenes. 3 scenes, yeah. 2 with Will and then 1 on the phone later.
Yeah, but there's also the whole sequence where they're kind of trying to maneuver around him. He's sort of like present in absentia as they're scrambling around trying to analyze the toilet paper note.
Yeah. But I think the main thing is Brian Cox is playing Hannibal Lecter as a regular character in this. I mean, not a regular character. He's a genius serial killer, but he's not...
Sure.
This sort of heightened lizard man universal monster that he ultimately becomes. He is, he's a serial killer. He is a madman who murders women. And it's kind of weird to see him in that context here.
That's what I like about this movie, actually. One of the things I like about it is how kind of unimpressed it is by Lecter and by serial killers in a way that future movies... I mean, once Anthony Hopkins gets a hold of it and wins an Oscar for it or whatever, did he win that or was he just nominated?
Oh, he won.
Yeah. Of course he won. Yeah. He takes over those movies and those movies all become about how, what an incredible
how clever
specimen this is. Yeah. And this one, he does a clever thing in this, which is fun to watch. Just sort of that lo-fi cleverness is always great to watch. But this is a movie about serial killers and about a guy whose life is defined and wrapped up and kind of ruined by hunting serial killers. That is not nearly as impressed with serial killers as a lot of serial killer fiction is, if that makes sense.
That's true. I mean, I think it's still a little impressed with them. I mean, it's it's still a movie. It's still fetishizing their nature a little bit. I think that Thomas Harris is responsible for us believing that serial killers have these are supposed to have these goofy nicknames, like the fun names that they get in Thomas Harris books.
Yes, the Minnesota Shrike and
the Tooth Fairy and the Buffalo Bill and Hannibal the Cannibal. I mean, we give them nicknames in the real world, but they're like the Green River Killer. I guess right. Zodiac is kind of the big one, but he gave that himself. It doesn't count. I was trying to rack my brain for, are there any silly serial killer names in real life on this level? I don't think so. I don't think we I think it's a little bit gross.
Yeah, we try and avoid
do
that, I suppose. I mean, and here I kind of like what Red Dragon does with it, though, where he wants to be the Red Dragon, but he's branded the Tooth Fairy by the media, and that drives actually a lot of his actions in the plot. Of him lashing out at the media specifically, including just unrecognizable Stephen Lang in this movie, playing the tabloid reporter, just full like flock of seagulls. Stephen, I had no idea that this was part of his backstory. Of course, I should have known he was alive in the '80s, but I didn't realize that the '80s had hit him this hard.
Oh yeah, big, and big Chicago too. He's got enormous Chicago theater vibes in this. I don't even know if that's accurate, but that's the vibe.
That's the thing. You know what? I don't even know Stephen Lang's backstory. I might have guessed British if you had asked me, but I think that's just how a lot of stage actors strike me. No, he's an American actor, born in New York. So
he's ladling on the Chicago in this though.
Oh, well, that's Mann's note to everybody. I mean, what's the most Man thing about this? Is it, I don't know, it's a game can play. Is it the color palette?
I think it's the color palette. The protagonist, maybe? I don't know. There's a lot.
Well, the protagonist has too much Thomas Harris in it, I think.
Perhaps.
Yes, he's obsessed and driven, sort of, but he's not controlled enough to be a Michael Mann protagonist fully. I think maybe more so in this movie than in the book he is. But
this is like by far the least nervy, least weird and twitchy Will Graham anyone's ever done. This is like, this guy is stoic compared to everyone else who's played the role.
Yeah, but it's still the most twitchy and nervy of any Michael Mann protagonist we're going to see.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, I don't know who else is there. Jamie Foxx and Collateral, maybe, but
sure.
But the other Man staples you got, besides the neon '80s color palette and styles, just tremendous white short shorts. On William Peterson in this, but you've got the whirlwind romance with the Tooth Fairy taking the blind lady on one date, and then.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that in the context of a man romance. That's exactly what it is, though.
In his mind, they're married. I mean, he's a psychotic, killer in this, so it's not. It's less weird in some way.
Those are romantic scenes. Those are not like Psycho, like, oh, there's tension because we know he's the kid. No, they're just romance scenes. It's wild. I mean, there's some ultimately, but all that stuff with the tiger, nope. They're just falling in love.
But maybe is the most Michael Mann thing about this casting Dennis Farina as Jack Crawford.
Oh, well, it's a great choice.
And making his base of operations Chicago, like really explicitly Chicago. Like they mentioned it a weird amount of times. And, very into letting you know that he's got a Learjet gassed up and ready to go to wherever else they need to go.
Yeah, that's definitely Michael Mann doing his thing because, this character is based in Langley, of course, and I think canonically or whatever. That's where he hangs out most of the time anyway. Lecter's in Baltimore. I don't know. They don't really pin it down exactly where everyone is all the time in this, aside from Florida. But, you can definitely tell Chicago most of the time.
Yeah. Well, and one of the murders definitely happens in Birmingham, which presumably Alabama. There's probably Birminghams in like 10 different states actually, but presumably that's Alabama. And of course the climax, I mean, the Tooth Fairy is based out of St. Louis, and a big part of the climax is them flying that Learjet into St. Louis. You get a nice shot of the arch and everything.
Yep.
But it's, it seems like the Tooth Fairy murders are in the South. I think one of them was in Atlanta and one of them is in Alabama. So I don't know that Chicago's a better base of operations than Langley. That seems just to be to give context for putting Farina in such a prominent role in this movie.
Farina is great in this role. He's not much of him in it, but it's fantastic choice for it.
He's all over this movie. What I mean, like.
Yeah, I mean,
he's in it more than Brian Cox as Lecter.
Oh, sure.
And more than Kim Greist as the wife. So I'd say that makes him the third lead after even the Tooth Fairy doesn't show up until over halfway.
Then it's all him. Then it's all Tooth Fairy show.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, he's still, he's basically a person for Will Graham to talk to a lot of the time. But what a person for Will Graham to talk to. And Jack Crawford, of course, is another character like Lecter that is like in all of these stories, has been played by several actors at this point, like great actors. And I don't know. I mean, we're going to ultimately get into the Silence of the Lambs of it all, but Farina is in contention for my favorite Jack Crawford, which is, I think they've all been pretty great too. So that's not nothing.
Well, I mean, I guess, do we need to, should we rank all the people and how our Grahams, our Crawfords, and our Lecters across the 3 different adaptations?
Oh, I think ultimately we'll have to, yes.
Okay. Let's start at the top with Will Graham. So we got William Peterson here. We got Edward Norton in the Red Dragon movie. And we have Hugh Dancy in the Hannibal TV show.
This is good. This will set the sort of the palette, how we're coming to this from Lecter. Yeah.
Is there any case for, I suppose, the for the Red Dragon film version for any of these?
No, I'm afraid there is not. There is not. That will definitely not win any of these contests. It will come in last in pretty much all of them. I'm fairly certain. Yes, it will. Mm-hmm. I mean, Lecter, Anthony Hopkins as Lecter is, an iconic performance.
Oh yeah.
Not in Red Dragon.
Right. I kind of was just glazed over in my mind that, of course he is the Lecter in that movie. That's why that movie exists. That's the only reason that movie exists.
Exactly. But he's actually quite bad in it. It's the worst thing in the film. In fact, it is. In fact, it's mostly the same dialogue. I think everything that Brian Cox says in this film, and Hopkins says in Red Dragon, and a lot of extra stuff as well. Of course, they expanded his role. But all the good lines he has come from the novel and are in Red Dragon. Have you ever seen Blood in the Moonlight, Jack? It appears quite black. All of that is, right out of the book. But he's very silly and very fat and not threatening and a clown in Red Dragon, I'm afraid. So the 1-to-1 comparison of him and Cox playing the exact same scenes does him no favors. Cox kind of blows him out of the water in this particular case, but then he's so good in Silence, so it's tough.
Okay, but in my opinion, they're both blown out of the water by Mads Mikkelsen in Hannibal.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if they're ever going to do a Hannibal episode specifically, so I guess this is the only place to really address this. But I really think that Mads on that show is one of the greatest feats of acting that the medium has ever seen, in the way that it completely recontextualizes that character that is so iconic and so hammy. I don't even know how you begin to say, yes, I'm going to play this character in this way that has almost nothing to do with what Anthony Hopkins did. And it made him actually scary for the first time, which I had kind of forgotten that Hannibal Lecter is a scary guy.
Yeah.
From the Hopkins performance. And it I don't know if I would say it totally ruins the Hopkins performance for me, but it kind of does. I suddenly cannot take those performances seriously at all anymore.
I like him in the original Silence of the Lambs enormously. I mean, I think it's my third favorite.
It's certainly the best.
It is heightened, obviously, but in a very intentional way. Yes. He's kind of like this more than human kind of creature, a universal monster. And Ridley Scott takes that and runs with it. He's still kind of fun in that movie, Hannibal, which is not a very good movie, but it has its charms, because it's just full gothic nonsense. And I mean, just contrasting the way the cells Hannibal appears in these films kind of tells you the general tone and of the performance.
I was going to mention that. Yeah, you're right. Because in Silence, he's in a full-on Dracula's castle. He has a dungeon to himself.
And he's got a mouth face mask biting thing. All the iconic image. It's all heightened goofery.
Yeah, it's like an inverted Phantom of the Opera mask type of thing. And in Manhunter, Lecter is a guy in a tiny all white cell in all white scrubs, with nothing adorning it, and he's
no grandeur to it.
A specimen in a cage. Yeah, no grandeur whatsoever, and he's still dangerous and still manages to make moves. Even, and that's what's. It's impressive that he finds a way to affect the outside world from this, almost like the Magneto cell in X-Men 2.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Compared to the Silence of the Lambs cell, it seems very ordinary, but then you pull back a little that this all white cell is it's a Magneto cell. It's
Yes.
always kind of heightened. And Mickelson, for completion's sake, is also in a weird Baroque glass cell that's kind of artfully designed in its own right. Looks like all the mise en scene of that show, which is a gorgeous looking, well designed show.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you go to a Dunkin' Donuts on the Hannibal TV show, and it's going to be weirdly baroquely colored and shaped and everything. Like it's an art piece. Everything. I mean, and that's what that show actually does great. Is that Hannibal's whole life is an artistic performance in a way that makes sense in the context that it establishes.
That's a good way of looking at it. What I've always found fascinating about it is he is an artist who is not looking. It is for his own edification entirely. Like he's not performing for anyone other than himself. There's so much potential to get bogged down here.
Sure,
let's keep on track.
As
here.
A contrast to the Tooth Fairy, to Francis Dolarhyde wants people to witness his transformation into the Red Dragon.
Exactly.
So who's the best Dolarhyde? We got Tom Noonan here.
Tom Noonan is the best Dolarhyde.
You got Ralph Fiennes in the movie and Richard Armitage on the show. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tom Noonan, I would agree. Doesn't fit the description from the book as well because he's supposed to be like a bodybuilder in addition to being just as large as Tom Noonan is. But Tom Noonan just,
he's scary.
I'm sorry to say, but he looks like a monster. He just looks like a Frankenstein. He played Frankenstein in the Monster Squad, I believe, and without makeup. Or less than a lot of people would have. Yeah. I mean, God, just he's a wonderful presence. You just love to see him pop up and everything. He's the Grim Reaper in Last Action Hero, I believe, or not the actual Grim Reaper, but the axe murderer guy.
Yeah, I believe Ian McKellen, our friend from The Keep, is the Grim Reaper. Yes, but no, yeah, he's playing the Tooth Fairy in Last Action Hero, kind of.
Right.
This is sort of a role that defines him for a while. I mean, he's kind of broken out of it now. He does interesting Charlie Kaufman roles and stuff like that. He's a good character actor, but he still gets to play Satanists and murderers and stuff like this. And I mean, look, what else is he going to do? He looks like Tom Noonan. He's he's making a job out of it, a career. So, of course, he's great in this. And
nowadays he could probably make a living, playing aliens on The Mandalorian or something. But
almost weird that
in the 80s, yeah. Well, still, he doesn't need to. I think he made it. He managed to carve out a niche for himself, and good for him. And part of that is just how wildly effective he is here. I mean, like, this is a weird structural decision to make. This movie is so much about this character that does not appear for an hour out of, like, what is this, 100-minute movie?
Yeah, it's a little longer. I know this is over 2 hours. This is
it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was exactly 2 hours on the nose, according to Google.
Okay.
I don't think he shows up for over an hour in. And yeah, he kind of takes it over at that point. But that's part of what I mean of not this movie not being so enamored with the serial killing aspect of it, that there's like a cold open where you see, a point of view shot of him like going into the bedroom of the sleeping couple. And then we don't get any other like quote unquote serial killer action, like there's like one big serial killer scene here where he's tormenting Freddie Lowndes. And that's the kind of stuff that I feel like serial killer movies get off on the most. And, I imagine I haven't seen the Red Dragon movie in 20 years, but I imagine it makes room for 3 of those.
I guess. I mean, there's more, for sure. Yeah. Certainly more. The way to think of the Red Dragon movie, the Rhett Ratner film, is just as part of the just onslaught of 90s serial killer programmers that kind of came out in the wake of Silence of the Lambs. It's just another copycat or Bone Collector, or like they were very hot at the time. So not one of the top flight ones like Silencer 7. This is
right.
One of the many other ones that kind of came out, and in that context, it's fine. But
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head for, as the critique you need to, only critique you need of the Red Dragon movie is it's one of those 90s serial killer movies that came out in 2002.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of Brett Ratner's whole career. He's sort of a guy who made 90s movies in the aughts.
I did rewatch Red Dragon for this episode to follow up the watching Manhunter, and I found it actually to be really instructive, just in noticing how much Mann brought to it. You know, when we watch like both versions of The Fog last year for John Carpenter, you know, I can't say that watching the new version of The Fog showed any new light on what John Carpenter did. It was just a shitty movie. Red Dragon is not a very good movie, but what it does do is it's kind of professionally executed in almost every way. It just has none of that next level stuff. Like everything Michael Mann about Manhunter stripped out of it, and it's just a vehicle for plot. You know, it even has on paper a better cast, but it doesn't matter. You know, it's
right. It's got an incredible cast on paper. Yeah. It's just exactly the sum of its parts, possibly a little less, I guess, but definitely not an inch more than the sum of its parts. Whereas Michael Mann movie is pretty much always going to be more, because he brings the madness.
Yeah, it's. I mean, even The Keep, there was like stuff in there that it just sort of felt elevated and more interesting than it should have been, even in a film that's kind of a disaster.
I mean, that's a movie with 60% of its parts missing.
Yeah. But this one is complete control of just like the images you're seeing. This has like deep expressionist kind of photography in it. Oh, this is weird. The cinematographer, Dante Spinotti, same guy who did Red Dragon. He did both films, which is crazy because they couldn't look more different. And and Red Dragon's also written by Ted Talley, the guy who won an Oscar for Silence of the Lambs screenplay. So like they had all the component pieces in that, except Brett Ratner apparently is a terrible filmmaker.
Well, I don't remember that movie being incompetently shot or anything. But
it's not at all.
Like I said, that's it's competence and nothing more. And I guess
punishing competence.
And yes. Hopkins.
Well, he sucks. He fucking blows it in that movie, no question. That's the most phoned in you've ever seen him, and you've seen him really phoned in a lot of times. You know, like he's
sure.
More.
I've seen a lot of Thor movies.
Yeah, it's the same place. But he's just like, oh, the kids like this, do they? Yeah, okay. You know, in full on don't give a fuck mode.
I remember very little of that movie. One thing that stands out for me is the worst fucking like prequel ending.
It's real bad.
I can remember. It's like, it's still my go-to example of like how prequels do things badly. Is the final scene has nothing to do with the rest of the movie, of someone coming to Lecter in his cell and telling him that there's a young female FBI agent that wants to see him, and he turning to the camera and saying, "What's her name?" And it's just.
It's really bad. It's
got nothing to do with Red Dragon or Will Graham or the entire story that's just happened. It's just poking the audience in the ribs and going, you remember the thing. You remember. And it's, as prequels have come to dominate more and more of our lives in the 20 years since, that one's always has still stuck with me. The other thing I remember making time for it is the opening showing Lecter attack and stab Will Graham. And,
did you remember he has a ponytail in that sequence?
Yes, God. I don't have time to process that the decision making there right now. I was just going to say what this contrast to Manhunter for me is how much Manhunter and Mann himself are willing to leave out of this movie from the beginning and the end.
So much, yes.
He's very comfortable spooling out that yes, Lecter stabbed Will Graham, and that's sort of like drove him into retirement and fucked him up, like through the course of the movie. Does not like that. I mean, you understand exactly how they decided, yes, we will do this as a cold open sequence in the other movie. But man,
it's constructed about being about Hannibal Lecter as much as possible.
But on the other end, he cuts out the ending part.
Wow, what a bold move. Right. You know, there's this incredible, like, it's very, very plotty, very, Hollywood pot boiler ending in the book. Where the Tooth Fairy fakes his own death and comes and attacks Will Graham's family in Florida, and they just don't do it in Manhunter. It's just gone completely. It's it's better for it too. It's way better for it.
Well, the setup for it's all still there. They still do the whole thing of Hannibal like sneaking him Will Graham's address, which is the setup for that thing. He still has Dollarhide kill the guy who's like corpse he would use.
Yes.
As a plant in his own house when he burns it down to set this up. and yet Mann's just like, yeah, but it's too bullshitty. I'm just going to have my guys shoot him.
They cut all the bullshit out of this, I think, is the main thing. This is all about vibes and very little like Hollywood serial killer plotting structure. You know, it's about process when we see him doing stuff. It's about them figuring stuff out, you know, in a forensic detail kind of way. And that's all very Mann. That's fun to watch, especially as he presents it. Another thing that is just not present in this film is most of the Red Dragon lore. Like the William Blake painting and the all his stuff about becoming and
it's there. I mean,
it's there.
The painting's there,
but
he doesn't go cut the painting out of a frame in a museum and eat it. Like
no,
he doesn't.
In the book. Yeah,
as I remember, I did read the book when I was a teenager, and so I that part I remember.
Well, it's all there in the Brett Ratner film. It is all it is there. There is like an ongoing like Norman Bates thing with Ralph Fiennes. Where the Red Dragon is a separate entity that he's like having conversations with, and well, I don't know. I say Norman Bates, it's almost more like Gollum. You know, it's more just like, no, you can't have a Red Dragon and shit like that. Fighting over the soul of his girlfriend, the blind girl, and none of it works. It's not helped by Ralph Fiennes being kind of bad, I'm afraid, in that film, which you don't often see, but he is.
Yeah,
and. It's just really, really makes the Mann film look so much more adult, I guess, is probably the best way I can put it. It is
which is strange because it's so much more stylized.
Oh yeah.
That you would think that the more tamped down, like the one that's presentation is more sober, I guess. And, that looks quote unquote more like a regular movie and less like an 80s fever dream would be the more adult one. But it's not.
Not at all. No, that's just a slave to Hollywood convention every step of the way. And this is clearly an expression of an artist. You know, this is something that somebody who with a real keen intellect for what color associates with what mood, and applying that to the story he's telling. Like, this is all about getting inside Will Graham's head as Will Graham gets into the Tooth Fairy's head. You know, and
Hannibal Lecter gets into Will Graham's head, but it's also, like I said, sort of a CSI movie. Before that, this was not a thing that existed then. That all is very familiar to us now. Maybe that's aged the movie poorly. Just how much of that's well, if there's things that have aged the movie poorly, I don't even think it's the 80s stylings.
It's aged quite well, actually. Yeah,
yeah, me too. But if anything has, it's that. Future versions of Lecter and Lecter's prominence in the culture have kind of colored our view of this portrayal. And maybe it feels like slight because he's not in it enough or whatever. And just because we've been so inundated with CSI as like the dominant form of TV, network procedural storytelling, that stuff doesn't feel very novel anymore. It's still quite fun to watch because I think Mann presents it. So just virtuosically.
Well, it feels unique. Because Silence of the Lambs and its immediate imitators kind of defined the style. Or, honestly, in a lot of ways, all those imitators have the Red Dragon thing. Certainly CSI does. Just sort of the flattened version of Silence of the Lambs. And so Manhunter kind of feels like its own thing entirely, which is very exciting when you're watching all these sort of plot threads and characters and familiar interactions. But they're just presented in this expressionist style. It does not fit along the rest of the Lecter-verse at all, even though there are multiple different styles at play there. The Manhunter is the most different by far, and yeah, of course, this is based on Mindhunter, the John Douglas nonfiction book about the birth of the behavioral studies FBI as what the Netflix Fincher show is about. And which we've talked about.
We've done an episode on that. So we are now going to have a Manhunter TV episode and a Manhunter movie episode.
Mindhunter. It's Mindhunter.
Oh, Mindhunter. That's what they did. Okay.
Apparently the name Manhunter came from a review of the novel Red Dragon by Stephen King. Apparently. This is the rumor. Because Dino De Laurentiis changed the name because he didn't want it to be associated with Bruce Lee films. Red Dragon.
Okay, yeah, that's the bit of trivia,
Yeah.
one sentence of trivia I'd read that Dio De Laurentiis insist on changing the name, which is kind of crazy because not Manhunter's not a bad title, but Red Dragon's kind of a great title.
Oh yeah. Michael Mann and Brian Cox have both publicly said it was really stupid to change the name.
because it was a really popular novel at the time too.
Yeah.
Like, it was a bestseller, so let's run away from that, I guess, was the thinking. Anyway.
Well, the other thing though, the thing about Mindhunter, obviously it's about getting into the head of the killers and, being like, okay, we can profile them in this way, okay, he's a lonely 35-year-old white male, as most of them are. But beyond that, the other thing,
kind of like the hack in the game Guess Who, where you can just like ask if they have a mustache first or something like that. And then...
the other thing, though, and I think this is kind of underrated, is that such a big part of Mindhunter, the book, the series, the whole concept is talking to serial killers in captivity. Mm. And that, of course, becomes
Lecter.
An enormous plot engine and device and conceit for these films going forward. And Lecter being the obvious, most famous version of that. It is represented here, and it's so much more heightened even than the stuff that happens in Mindhunter, where they're corresponding with the killer on the outside and all that stuff. And somehow it doesn't feel like bullshit because it's steeped in this deep attention to forensic science. This is a fascinating piece of trivia I found up. Michael Mann was in correspondence with a real serial killer as he was writing this, a guy named Dennis Wayne Wallace. And apparently Dennis Wayne Wallace's thing was he was obsessed with a woman who didn't know he existed. And he'd come to believe that Inagata Devita was their song and that he was and that is exactly why it's in the film Manhunter. It's because of a conversation with an actual killer.
I mean, tremendous use of that song. This,
one of the great uses of songs in movies.
Yeah. Like all-timer sequence of scoring with a, diegetic pop music. I mean, that's too many qualifiers. Just a great, one of the best uses of music in moviedom. But I had heard that too. That is an insane song to choose as your romantic opus for your theme of your relationship. But of course, serial killing is kind of an insane endeavor. Which
when you get right down to it, yes, absolutely.
That's even Mann, as much as he wants to respect the attention to detail and the people who have a system that they work, even he can't get on board with the serial killing aspect of it.
Well, yeah, he's like not, as you were saying, it's demystified in this completely. Beyond sort of the fetishy stuff, it's very he doesn't fucking care about him. He's not that interested in why he does what he does, or why he breaks the mirrors and sticks the glass in their eyes, beyond just how will this help us catch him?
Yeah, it's means to an end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which is great, and actually, I mean, that's one of the things. Credit to Thomas Harris for this. One, Francis Dollarhide, great name.
It is.
I'll always remember that I guess because I've seen this version of the story 3 times possibly, but also just a great memorable name. And his the pathology of the Tooth Fairy serial killer is pretty memorable. I don't remember what the Bone Collector's deal was, or
I doubt he had a very compelling one.
Right. But I remember a lot of the ins and outs of the Red Dragon's personal mythology there, which is kind of impressive how Manhunter, the movie, is not fetishistic about that stuff. Doesn't really care about digging down into why this guy's thing and why it's so important and how can we make this look amazing on screen. It's really, he's a monster and should be put down like a monster is the point of view of the movie and the cops in it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he is. He's really scary. He's the opening of this movie, the one of the scariest openings to any film. Mm-hmm. It's so good. I'm talking the first 30 seconds, which is just a home invasion from the point of view of the killer. Using
just
the flashlight,
shining a light on a sleeping couple.
Yeah. Yeah. Slowly, the wife slowly waking up and wait, what? Is there a person shining a flashlight in me in my own home in the middle of the night? And that's the end of it. And I don't know, maybe it's just the context of knowing the story of this film that makes that so terrifying. But I think it would still be scary coming in blind as well.
Yeah, I think so too. There's, I guess I'm getting at, there's a perfect excuse built into this story to do much more extensive home invasion sequences where Will Graham is walking these crime scenes and getting, trying to replay them in his own head. And it's built in right there. You can do a whole first sequence later in the movie of him creeping through the house and committing murders and atrocities and putting more blood on screen and more.
That's what the Hannibal show does. Yeah.
Stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the Hannibal show turns it into I don't know, To Sleep No More or something, but kind
of.
But again, this is more focused on Will Graham than on the Tooth Fairy for the entire movie, really, even when the Tooth Fairy comes into it on screen. And
I'm almost surprised how much they give the Tooth Fairy. It doesn't necessarily serve the story, because they don't care about his lore, really. They don't care about his becoming. Or rather, they don't want to give it any sort of credence or.
Well, they don't buy into the mythology.
Yeah,
the way he does.
Yeah,
and especially if you're not doing that final sequence,
right,
where the Red Dragon movie sort of works in a screenwriterly way that Will Graham uses some what he knows about the Red Dragon's pathology to sort of psych him out during that final attack sequence.
Gross.
And this movie's not going to fuck with that anyway.
That is a gross scene. I hate that scene. Actually, it's really bad.
Yes.
He calls his son an F-bomb in that his 8-year-old boy to save him is how that plays out. Another thing I hate about that, while we're on the subject, it ruins the happy ending completely. Even though they're fine, even though the family gets away with it, having this serial killer come in and threaten them and stab them, non-lethally, hold a broken piece of glass to his son's throat and stuff. Well, guess what? You're fucked up again now, Will. You're going back into probably an insanity ward for a little while just to deal with this, and your family's messed up too. By cutting that out, they have an authentically happy ending.
And that's kind of true of 60% of Hollywood movies that.
But they've already explained that that's what would happen in this movie.
Yes, precisely where I was going with that. That's the problem. This movie has established that that Hollywood convention does not apply here, like Happily Ever After, because it all begins. The whole whole story is built on how he's so fucked up from the last time he got stabbed and still got his man and put him away and everything. And that was the happy ending, except it's not for him. So,
yeah.
So those rules can't work here.
I guess in the Red Dragon film, it's less. We're in Hollywood bullshit land already, so I guess it's fine. I guess is the conceit that there will be no lingering ramifications of this home invasion. They killed him, and that's fine. That's
they slew the dragon.
Movie's operating on. Yeah,
I suppose this movie, Manhunter, plays things differently. It's got that scene in the grocery store between Graham and his son.
What a scene! God,
where
that's a good scene.
His son is kind of talking him through his trauma from the Lecter attack.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good scene. But just, I don't know. I guess I also saw the 80 or the Netflix version of White Noise recently, which also includes a lot of Technicolor. It's set in the 80s and sets a lot of key scenes in a grocery store.
Oh, is that the Adam Driver film, right?
Yes, the Adam Driver version.
I was thinking of the Michael Keaton Ghost film, you
Oh, no. Yes, the Don DeLillo book about 80s consumerism. And I was, wait a minute, is this what supermarkets really looked like in the 80s? Was it really this unending wall of color, popping in every direction? I was alive in the 80s. I think I would remember that. But maybe I just didn't go to properly art-directed grocery stores.
Well, maybe it's an expressionist Michael Mann-esque vision of the 80s. It could be. It was really getting into the head of the Adam Driver character somehow. And that cool blue on the wall represents him being in love.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's
I haven't
pretty
seen
heavy
it,
in this movie.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean that's in this movie. The family love scenes are sort of all tinged with that Michael Mann blue, neon almost blue thing, right?
It's beautiful. Honestly, it looks so cool. Yeah. That
And you get
one
the
shot.
synths behind it.
Yeah, I was kind of like, is this Tangerine Dream? It's not, but it sure sounds like it. Yeah.
Yeah, somebody's really really biting their style there.
Well, I mean, it's Michael Mann. It's going to sound like that, at least at this era of Michael Mann.
Yeah, I guess that's what we come back to here.
Mhm.
The cinematographer could be whoever. It's going to look like a Michael Mann movie. The score could be done by whoever. It's going to sound like a Michael Mann movie, which means it's going to sound like Tangerine Dream at least contributed something to it.
Almost wonder what Last of the Mohicans would sound like with a Tangerine Dream score.
Well,
Well, it would sound like Tangerine Dream, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think Legend works, so it probably wouldn't work there either.
yeah, probably not. I wouldn't change a single goddamn thing about Last Mohicans, but we'll talk about that in a week or two.
Of course. Yeah.
Sorry, we keep jumping around here. Do we want to rank our Jack Crawfords?
Oh,
Because
sure.
I think
sure.
Farina is neck and neck with Fishburne for me.
Interesting. I actually do have Scott Glenn at the top.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I love him in that. I think he's great. I think Silence of the Lambs is great. I really, I want to go out there. I don't care who knows it. I think Silence of the Lambs is a very good picture. And I would vote for Scott Glenn. And then I think I would vote Fishburne and then Farina. As great as he is. And
I mean, it's wild. This is like his first real acting movie, like
Yeah.
with full lines and everything.
Mhm.
And it's a really prominent role. Like you said, probably. I mean, is it? You could make a case it's a second lead because the Tooth Fairy takes so long to actually appear on screen.
I wouldn't make that case, but
yeah,
I guess so. Screen time wise, probably, yeah.
right. That's just a lot to put on an
Mhm.
actor who has appeared as an extra basically prior to this and who's not a trained actor at all.
Yeah.
But Mann just had so much faith in Farina. So I really think that he had, been in Thief and one or two other things as a background performer, and Mann's just like, yeah, put him front and center. I need that mustache here to ground this heightened pot boiler serial killer stuff. And
He's
I
so
think
good.
it works.
Though. Yeah.
Works very well to do that.
Mhm. Yeah.
You buy that he has a relationship with Will Graham
Mm-hmm.
in a way that I don't think I probably do between Harvey Keitel and Edward Norton.
No, afraid not. I'm going to be harping on the Red Dragon readaptation because it is so just instructively worse in every way.
Of course.
But I mean, I kind of want to give enough time to the Mann film itself. It's so spectacular, and so I enjoyed the hell out of this. I don't know if I made that clear enough. I rewatching this week, I was just like, God, what a film! God, this is just gorgeous, just so enthralling, and it really draws you in, and it feels so dissimilar from the other Lecters. As I was saying, I'm just very taken with this movie. It is deeply entertaining in a way that I don't know. It's. And I'm usually such a plot guy, but they just take plot out of this the whole way through. It's just less plot, more vibes, more tone, and it works completely for me. It's thrilling, in fact.
You're right. They take a lot of plot out of this movie, but there's still plenty. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not a movie underburdened with plot. That's for sure. Yeah. And yeah, I guess that probably is part of why it still holds up together. Then there's a 5-minute dream sequence where he walks through the leads' homes and everything is sort of bathed in white, and their eyes are mirrors, like God looking at him, which is him getting into the Tooth Fairy's head. And I'm just like, oh God, this is cool. This is fantastic.
Yeah. All right. If there's one thing about this movie that doesn't work for me, I think there's only one thing, and it's some of Will Graham talking to himself.
I have to agree.
It's not the talking to himself. It's how mad he gets talking to himself.
Yeah.
That doesn't quite sell it to me. That
Yeah.
Peterson does not.
I wrote this down and I was kind of trying to like square this in my head because I don't know. I feel like it's like he doesn't believe it or something. Like William Peterson has not gotten all the way there. on being sold here. Maybe it's sort of some of the dialogue that comes from the novel, the stuff he's exactly. When he's mad at the Tooth Fairy, you did it, didn't you? Oh,
you son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know, it doesn't fit like with the whole thing of, his radical empathy version of, I feel that's probably from the Hannibal TV show, they call it that, where he's really inhabiting the guy's headspace. I don't buy that you do that and come out of it like fuming and going, "Yum, yum, yum, how dare you, sir." I think you're shook. I buy it more. He's shook up, but he's like still in it. So I don't know. I don't mind him talking to himself. It's just that's the only bit of the performance where it doesn't work. When he's working off other people or when he's silent, it's a great performance. And he feels authentically haunted.
There's moments that I do like that would fall into this category. Like him sitting alone in a diner with just rain beating on the windows and he's just sort of having a conversation with the Tooth Fairy. That's fun. It's just you and me now, sport. Stuff like that.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's when he's up in the tree. He's in the Tooth Fairy's tree house. I guess that's something that makes it feel extra childish that he's sitting in a tree house, basically. And sort of, I don't know, impotently flailing his fist and going, "Oh, you son of a bitch."
Yeah.
This is where you sat and ate your candy bar. Anyway.
No, you're not wrong. That would be my my one note as well. That's why it's 4.5 instead of 5 stars on Letterboxd for me. It is notable that those themes kind of pull me out a little bit.
But does that put him below Edward Norton in your?
No. That Edward Norton's entire performance is that stuff. Basically, right. It's bad. It's he's not well cast. You might think he would be because kind of a nervy weirdo would seem to be his thing, but I just don't think he's a protagonist. Edward Norton. I don't think he works in the lead role. Yeah, I think he's a very good actor.
I mean, we've praised Fight Club to high heavens here, but I guess that's almost a weird case where is Brad Pitt the leading role in that movie? Even
well, he's not the protagonist. That is correct. Yeah, and I don't know. I'm not with him on the journey. That's for sure. I don't, and his frosted blonde hair doesn't help.
But also, I guess Fight Club is also sort of uniquely tailored to his Norton's unsuitability as a protagonist.
Kind of, yeah.
That he's a supporting performance in his own story. That character, I mean, not just Norton. Yeah, I don't know. Like on paper, like you said, seems like a perfect Will Graham. Nervy and twitchy, vulnerable in a different way than Clarice Starling would have been, and yet you need that visionary behind the camera. Apparently,
I think so.
Mann's teaching us already.
I think another director might have gotten a better performance out of him. I mean, that's true of everyone in that movie. Like, certainly Ralph Fiennes would probably have an effective serial killer performance in him. But,
absolutely.
But he's not good.
We know Hopkins has an effective Hannibal in him.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I guess Keitel's fine. He's still my least favorite Will Graham.
I totally.
Yeah.
You mean Crawford?
Yeah. Excuse me. My least favorite.
Yeah, I had totally forgotten that's who played Crawford in that. I had to look up whether did Scott Glenn come back for that one? But no,
he should have. But no, he's fine. But I don't know. Let's see. I gotta say, I think the best Will Graham is Hugh Dancy, though.
Yeah, I think so.
That show's great. That show's really, really, really good. So
it's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, so is this what Mann is teaching us this early on in the Mann-Splaining journey about just elevating material by having a creator or an auteur with their own thing to it? I mean, I guess maybe a threshold question. Would you say Mann elevates this material?
Well, it's an interesting question because I think that the franchise as a whole, with the exception of the Red Dragon adaptation, most of these things are kind of elevated versions of serial killer stories. Like you get some people doing best work of their careers with Hannibal Lecter material. Or if not, like in Ridley Scott's Hannibal, for example, it's still, it's still just they keyed up dramatically. There's nothing conventional about that movie. It is It is just sort of this massive grand guignol showcase after showcase. You know, a lot of the best stuff in the Brian Fuller show, I think, kind of gets inspiration in that film. This is traditionally a heightened franchise, I guess is what I'm saying. Man is just sort of the most unique one because it comes before Silence of the Lambs and doesn't have a template to work off of.
Yeah, that's, I guess what the broader Lecter-verse shows us is that you can do this elevated, a la Silence of the Lambs, or, I mean, Hannibal, the TV show, is so elevated it almost wraps back around to being, like, say, Grand Guignol, or however you pronounce that word. Manhunter is definitely not that. But what the other, Red Dragon, Hannibal Rising, Ridley Scott's Hannibal shows is that this material can also be dragged down into pure pulp very easily.
Of course it can. Of course it can. Yes, it's a serial killer.
And Manhunter kind of sits outside of all that. It's not, it's not an Oscar movie.
Right.
The way that, I mean, Silence of the Lambs was sort of not a traditional Oscar movie at that point. That was sort of the story there, that it kind of took over the Oscars, even though they don't usually recognize that type of thing. But Manhunter is not even that. But I don't know if I would say it elevates the book exactly, but it definitely moves it laterally, at least, out of Lecter-verse and more into the Mann-verse.
Exactly. That's what's kind of most striking about Manhunter, is that it's more of a Michael Mann film than it is a Hannibal Lecter film.
Yes.
And the Hannibal Lecter films are very defined and very very clear in people's head what you're getting there. And this and Michael Mann too, to a lesser extent, I think has a very defined kind of vibe. It's more that. It's a lot more that than it is, anything like the Anthony Hopkins stuff, which everything is kind of like after Silence of the Lambs.
That's what's sort of striking about it, I guess. You could buy that there is a larger Michael Mann extended universe, right? Like, there's no reason why you can't accept that Thief and Heat and Black Hat all take place in the same, continent, like Earth.
Yeah,
timeline.
Our timeline, honestly. I mean, they take place in the real world. Yeah, sure.
And you can believe that that Manhunter, the movie, exists in the same reality as Heat and Black Hat more easily than you can believe that Manhunter exists in a world where Silence of the Lambs, the movie, went on to happen. You know what I mean?
Yes. No, I agree with you. This is definitely, I don't know. It's hard to say this is grounded and realistic because it's not. I mean, that just seems sort of like the perceptive lens that we're seeing it through. The story, nothing in the world feels heightened, even the dialogue, which is so arch as presented in Red Dragon, same dialogue. It comes off conversational here, the way Brian Cox plays it, and there's some doozy ass silly lines in this. Like what's the forensic analyst was measuring the bite marks or the on the toilet paper in his cell. Something like, "Oh, you're so sly, so am I." Stuff like that. Very writerly, way more conversational here than it would ever be in another film. And I don't know, it kind of just reminds me of, like, if you see great actors doing Shakespeare, the artifice of the dialogue kind of falls away. Or Kevin Smith even. Like Jason Lee can make Kevin Smith dialogue sound real.
Right. And not everybody can.
Yeah.
Like, not everybody in the scene with him can,
Almost no one, in fact.
Right. I take your meaning exactly. The man manages to make all that heightened stuff seem more conversational in every case, except for when Graham is talking to himself and fuming. That's where that part stands out to us. But it's the cinematography is heightened, but the actual material is grounded more, is what it feels like. The actual, the plot and the dialogue are more grounded, with that one exception. But it is, again, it's just so hard to say the word grounded with this when it's got that Miami Vice filter over it, everything.
Well, that's what's so
that we would not
about
change for the world,
right?
Yeah, we would not change that.
Yeah, that contradiction. I don't know if it's a contradiction. That dichotomy, between the visual heightened language and just sort of the grounded plotting and characters. You don't see it that often, and that's really really compelling and really works and defines him so much. Collateral does that. Most of his movies do that, obviously, and it kind of falls down sometimes. I think we'll talk about it in Public Enemies, when it doesn't quite work in the lab, but or The Keep, I guess. But for the most part, that's his secret weapon, right? I mean, we'll see as we go on, but it seems like that's a big key to what he does.
We're going to take a jump here because he does a lot of TV work in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
He's working on Miami Vice, and then there's that, Police Story. He does LA Takedown. So we're going to do a pretty big jump from this Manhunter's 1986, height of the 80s in terms of the timeline, right in the middle of the 80s, and just the look of this film is sort of maximum 80s. What do you think of, when you're the GTA Vice City look? And we're going to jump up to Last Mohicans, which is all the way into the 90s next, right?
Yeah, it's a long gap now. He's busy on TV.
There was like no trace of the 80s in that movie. Obviously, it's it's a period piece, but even that, there period pieces in different decades have different styles to them. And then from there we go on to like Heat and Heat has none of that, the color saturation or anything from the 80s left in it.
I'm going to miss that, but it has other stuff going on though.
Yeah.
Both those films do have, some visual signifiers that kind of heighten everything, or maybe it's just really well shot. I don't know. I'm going to have to revisit them and let you know, but it almost seems there's an impossibility to the visuals in these, and Collateral certainly has, a lot of visual.
Yeah, Collateral brings some of that back.
Yeah,
is what I feel like. The 90s are the most grounded era for him. I mean, The Insider, I think. Well, The Insider and Heat both are going to use that sort of neon blue staring at the ocean filter a couple of times. Maybe that's the only vestige of the 80s that makes its way into that 90s run.
God, I love when the Michael Mann characters stare at the ocean. It's really good.
I was about to say something very similar, and it sounds like such just like deliberate parody of of film bro stuff. But what am I like? It fucking works on me. What do you want me to say?
Yeah, it's great. It's so cool.
The synths are undeniable. All right. Any last thoughts on Manhunter?
Man, it's so good. I don't know. I mean, in the context of the greater Hannibal verse, I don't know. Did we talk about all that? Did we mention the Philip Seymour Hoffman character?
Not really.
Red Dragon. That's another character.
I thought that was the one. The one thought I had was, is that the one character where the Red Dragon version of that character might be the best?
It's hard to say what attracted Philip Seymour Hoffman to the role. It is a character. I mean, I guess the idea is it's one big scene with Ralph Fiennes. That there's appeal in that, I guess. And, but it's such a maximalist version of the same scene in Manhunter, which, I mean, they're naked. They're both naked in Red Dragon.
Right.
In Manhunter, Stephen Lang he's just sort of like attached to a wheelchair. His naked body is glued to the wheelchair in Manhunter, in Red Dragon. And, they have the same dialogue again. Do you see all that stuff? They all same lines. You owe me awe. An incredible scene. Difference is Ralph Fiennes strips naked in front of a projected light and displays the William Blake full back tattoo that he has and flexes a lot. And there's a lot more screaming and theatrical kind of serial killer stuff in it. So, I mean, it's exactly what you would expect. It's a Hollywood version of that scene. And it's a little upsetting, but I don't know. I think that even with Philip Seymour Hoffman playing I'm About to Die, which, he's pretty good at.
Sure.
It's not as good of a scene like the rest of the
movie. You just jogged a memory I had of seeing Red Dragon in the theater, and the exact moment I sort of got off the ride was the flaming wheelchair coming down the ramp, just flying through the screen.
Well, that's in both movies.
It is in both movies. But somehow the visual language of Manhunter made that feel like it. I mean, it's still probably the goofiest moment of the whole movie, but it just played as pure comedy to me in the Red Dragon version.
It's a little
with
funny.
Hoffman. And I don't think that Brett Ratner is deft enough tonally to thread that needle between wanting it to be as intense and scary as he wants that You Owe Me All scene to be versus, but this is also kind of goofy, right? The reveal.
Yeah, he's not equipped to handle that very well. He did a bad job on that movie. It's and it's probably his best movie, oddly enough. He is a bad filmmaker, I'm afraid.
Yeah, we've talked too goddamn much about that
We
movie.
have. I might cut this whole part out. God, it's not good. It's the important thing is the Manhunter film. That's what we're here to talk about.
Yes.
I don't know. Let's see. Last thoughts on actual Manhunter. It's what is the thing in and of itself? What is its nature?
It's Michael Mann doing serial killers, which we've done a lot of serial killing on this on Framework over the years. Because we did Fincher mainly. It feels like a wheelhouse he's something he could have returned to more frequently because it's a subgenre of crime fiction, but he almost has his own like eponymous corner of crime fiction. Like Michael Mann style crime fiction is its own thing that's about high level heisting and
and professionals.
Exactly.
And he's not into obsession. So it's so I don't know that
he's into obsessive, like drilling down into process and having a way of doing it. And I guess that's the thing. Okay. Why is Michael Mann not attracted to serial killers? Why? Because it seems like he could be really good at that to a degree because he's into people who have a method that they follow obsessively. And that's what draws him, allows him to do serial killer stuff pretty well. But maybe what brings the vibe I'm talking about of not being overly like in love with serial killers and over impressed with them is has disdain for compulsion.
Yeah.
That the fact that the serial killers can't help themselves. And that they have to do this thing. Not that they choose to do this thing, that they have to do it. That he holds that somewhat in philosophical contempt.
Well, it doesn't interest him. He doesn't care about that guy. He does not get in that guy's skin, which is interesting because this movie is about trying to get into that guy's skin, essentially.
That's the idea. But that's what it's about, approaching that from the outside. And that's why Michael Mann, I guess, is not going to get enamored of serial killers, though, is that they're too sloppy.
Yeah, he doesn't share any of that compulsion, as opposed to Fincher, who is, you can see it's 1-to-1. It's just like, oh, okay, I got you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he's also somebody who's very much in control of his craft, but that's not like to an explicit thematic end the way Mann is. That Fincher protagonists are not obsessively in control of their craft the way that Mann protagonists are.
Fincher could have taken the Red Dragon cast and script and turned it into something, I bet. Of course he could have. Of course he could have. Is Fincher a better director than Brett Ratner? Yes, he is. Okay. Yeah,
he could have scared me with the murder scene and then made me laugh with the flaming wheelchair scene.
That would have been the way to go with him, yeah. It's he could have done more serial killers, you're right, but I don't know. I think he would have if he wanted to. It seems like a no-brainer. It would have been easy to get that film made in the 90s. That's for sure.
For sure.
So, yeah.
But it only pops up with Waingro and Heat. And, that's a character he holds in total contempt.
Yeah, that's incidental serial killing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, incidental stuff that's not what Mann's into. Every crime you commit, everything you do, every coffee you order, it has to be done just right, just so.
Well, I think this is...
Or else you are not a truly activated man.
I think the film that this is going to end up having most commonality with in the Mann canon is Miami Vice, which it's been a minute. I'm excited to revisit that and see how close it gets. I mean, vibes, yeah. Color palettes, long tracking shots, intellectual decisions to fall in love, things like that. I'm excited to see how close it cues to Manhunter. And yeah, that's I don't know. That's a ways away, actually.
At first, it is. We have to take a sojourn back to the 1700s, and that's where we're heading next to visit with the Last of the Mohicans. Spoiler alert: I really like that one.
Who doesn't, man? Who doesn't?
The Academy and audience members in 1991. But
That's weird. I got to look into that.
Thanks
Like, how come
for doing this with us, everyone.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for listening. Please rate and review the podcast on the app of your choice, what have you. It helps visibility, etc. Yeah. Happy Man's Day to you. The fuck? Okay.
Happy Man's Day.
That's what I believe.